A push to decriminalize marijuana in one Texas city gets rejected by voters.
Every which way we look at marijuana use, it seems to go downhill.
We look closer at the vote. Does it signal a shift away from calls for looser drug laws? Lawmakers approve billions to improve safety and service for air travelers.
This bill was a bipartisan landmark legislation designed to really impact and improve aviation in America.
We speak one-on-one with Senator Ted Cruz about what the legislation means for Texas and what comes next. A medical emergency and a tip led us to investigate Botox injectors across the state, a certification almost anyone can get with a simple weekend training. We brought concerns like that to state leaders, now taking renewed action to protect Texas patients and crack down on this largely unregulated cosmetic industry.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. An effort to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana appeared on the ballot recently in another Texas community. The results turned out differently than similar initiatives in other Texas cities. Will DuPree looks into what this could mean for the state's marijuana reform movement.
Voters in Lubbock overwhelmingly rejected Prop A, a marijuana reform that drew loud opposition from local conservative leaders.
I think marijuana use and legalizing it or decriminalizing it, I think is a little bit of semantics there, is a bad idea for Texas.
The proposal would have told police to stop arresting people for having less than 4 ounces of marijuana in most cases. This mirrored similar measures already approved by voters in at least 6 other Texas cities, including Austin. How do you think the loss in Lubbock affects the movement for marijuana reform?
We just weren't able to get that voter turnout high enough. But in a lot of cities, you may not have that same issue. And so I don't think for the overall mission, people should take this as sort of a bad sign, if you will.
So far, the idea of decriminalizing marijuana has gone nowhere at the Texas Capitol. That's why groups like Ground Game Texas are pushing local ballot measures to send a message and activate voters.
And we find that there's a lot of cynicism about political parties and candidates. And so when folks can go vote for an issue, that's more relatable to a lot of people and will give them a reason to go to the polls.
One change that's likely to come next session, however, is making it harder for cities to get these kinds of measures on a ballot.
They're allowed to have their referendums, but not when the premise of the referendum is against state law. It's hard to make an idea into law, but I'm going to be attempting to get that one through.
I visited a gathering for addiction specialists that happened this week in Austin, and they gave me an additional perspective that you may not have considered. One expert says it's time for Texas to legalize fentanyl test strips, pointing to Austin police recently detecting fentanyl in marijuana after a deadly surge in overdoses.
We really need access to things like fentanyl test strips so that as we see more marijuana come on the streets, people have access to make sure that there's not fentanyl in it.
You may remember a bill to decriminalize fentanyl test strips passed the Texas House in the last legislative session, but it died in the Senate.
Well, back to the local efforts to decriminalize marijuana. You mentioned that voters in 6 Texas cities approved ordinances, but the state is pushing back, right?
Yeah, and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is actually suing 5 of the cities where voters approved those decriminalization measures. There is one community, Harker Heights, that is not included in that because its city council actually voted to repeal the ordinance after the election. Soon, though, there could be 2 other cities that are added to this list of communities that have voted on this. Groups are actually collecting signatures right now to put this on the ballot in both Dallas and Lockhart.
Thanks, Will. Last month, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration announced it would move to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. The federal proposal would recognize the medical uses of cannabis, but it would not legalize it for recreational use. Listing marijuana as a Schedule III drug could make research on it easier. It could also reduce taxes for legal cannabis businesses. The proposal still has to clear several review steps before it takes effect. Lawmakers approve billions to improve safety and service for air travelers. We speak one-on-one with Senator Ted Cruz about what the legislation means for Texas and what comes next. Plus, Texas doctors warning about the risks of Botox injections from people without proper training and medical supervision.
Do you want to play Russian roulette just because you don't want your face to have wrinkles.
We investigate this largely unregulated cosmetic industry, often operating out of the back rooms of salons and boutiques.